Chapter 8. The Escape. The alien tunnels twisted around Elias Marrow, their translucent walls pulsing with green-veined light, a labyrinth of gelatinous membranes that quivered like living flesh, guiding him through a reality that wasn't human but alive. The breathable liquid, sharp with a metallic tang, filled his lungs, sustaining him in a space where geometry fractured, angles spiraling into impossible curves that clawed at his splintered mind. His boots sank into the pulsating floor, each step a struggle, his body sluggish, barely coherent, driven not by will but by the tunnel's intent, their walls rippling, urging him forward, toward escape or expulsion, a speck ejected from a god that didn't care. The tunnels bent, their curves tightening, not random but deliberate, a path that wasn't chosen but given, the walls' gelatinous surfaces rippling, their veins pulsing faster, as if hurrying him, expelling him. Elias's breath came in gasps, shallow, ragged. His boots slipped, the pulsating floor slick, alive, each step a pulse that echoed the core's heartbeat, the disk's lenses, the old one's patience. He saw them still, in his mind's fractured edges, liquid metal scouts, their spirals tightening, their gazes not human but alive, harvesting data for an awakening he couldn't stop, didn't understand, yet carried like a wound. His forearms glowed faintly, spirals etched into his skin, not tattoos but marks, pulsing green, a brand of the core's will, the god's claim, a truth that wasn't his but was now, undeniable, inescapable. The tunnel spiraled upward, its curves sharpening, the green light flaring, a beacon that wasn't hope but expulsion, a path to the surface, to the sea, to a world that didn't know, didn't care. Elias stumbled, his knees buckling, his notebook slipping, but he clutched it tighter, its sodden pages a relic, a vow, a fragment of the truth he'd die to carry. The tunnel opened, not to another chamber but to a hatch, its edges soft, organic, quivering like lips, exhaling a faint mist that shimmered in the green light, a maw that wasn't metal but flesh, alive, beckoning. Elias froze, his boots sinking into the pulsating floor, the liquid rippling, the hatch's glow a promise, a threat, a release. The walls shuddered, their veins flaring, a pulse that wasn't sound but intent, a command that wasn't spoken but felt, pushing him, ejecting him. He staggered forward, his hands trembling, the notebook clutched to his chest, the tape's case burning, the spirals on his skin glowing brighter, as if the system was writing its final mark, a signal sent, a witness released. The hatch yawned wider, its interior pulsing with green light, a tunnel to the sea, to the world, to a life he no longer fit, a reality he couldn't unsee. Elias stepped into the hatch, the liquid surging, not resisting but guiding, a current that wasn't water but will, pulling him through the quivering maw, its edges brushing his skin, warm, alive, a sensation that wasn't touch but scrutiny, a system that saw him, knew him, claimed him. The tunnel tightened, its walls contracting, the green light fading, replaced by a darkness that wasn't empty but heavy, a pressure that wasn't depth but presence, the sea's embrace, the trench's gaze, the god's indifference. His mind flickered, a vision of the core, its spirals spinning, its truth pouring into him. Seeds, scouts, old ones, a cycle that didn't care, didn't judge, just worked, eternal, indifferent, alive. He laughed again, a choking sound, swallowed by the liquid, the darkness, the sea, a scientist broken by a truth that didn't need his proof, his name, his soul. The hatch spat him out, a violent expulsion, the liquid giving way to water, cold, biting, real, the sea's weight crushing his chest, his lungs burning, no longer sustained by the system's breath, but fighting for air, for life, for a world he didn't belong to. Elias thrashed, his arms flailing, his spirals glowing faintly, a fading mark in the dark. He surfaced, gasping, choking, the Atlantic's waves slamming him, a living beast that roared with salt and fury, its surface glinting under a moonless sky, a black expanse that hid the trench, the structure, the god. He clung to debris, a splintered plank, slick with algae, bobbing in the churning sea, a lifeline that wasn't salvation but survival, a speck adrift in a world that didn't know, didn't care. The structure was gone, vanished below, its green glow swallowed by the sea's black scar, the trench a silent wound, its presence heavy, alive, waiting. Elias's eyes darted, spiraling, searching the waves for a sign, a light, a disk, but there was nothing, only the sea's relentless pulse, the chance fading whisper, the spiral's glow on his skin, now dim, a memory of the core's claim. His breath came in ragged gasps, his body trembling, the cold seeping into his bones, his mind a chaos of fragments. Child, scientist, witness, woven into a cycle he couldn't escape, didn't want to escape. The notebook, sodden, clung to his chest, its pages a ruin, yet a vow, a truth he'd carry, a God he'd met. He floated, the waves carrying him, not guiding but indifferent, the sea a mirror to the system's vastness, its patience, its hunger. His spirals pulsed faintly, a rhythm that wasn't his but the core's, the gods, a mark that wouldn't fade, couldn't fade, a signal sent, a witness released. Elias whispered, "We're not even ants," his voice lost in the sea's roar, a prayer, a surrender, a truth that broke him, claimed him, made him its own. The chant lingered, a pulse in his bones, a vibration that shook his teeth, his spine, his soul, a voice that wasn't human but alive, whispering his name, a summons to a truth he'd die to uncover, a God that was waking, eternal, indifferent, alive. The waves rolled, the debris bobbed, and Elias clung on, barely coherent, a speck in the sea, marked by spirals. The sea churned under a moonless sky, its black waves slamming against Elias Marrow, a relentless beast that roared with salt and indifference, carrying him, a broken speck, toward a shore he didn't know, didn't want. Clinging to the splintered plank, slick with algae, he bobbed in the Atlantic's grip, his denim shirt heavy, soaked with seawater, his gray-streaked beard dripping, his eyes spiraling inward, marked by the alien core's truth, a system of seeds, scouts, and old ones, eternal, indifferent, alive. Barely coherent, his mind a chaos of fragments. Child, scientist, witness. He washed ashore, collapsing on a jagged beach, raving about the mother in the deep, as fishermen, wary and whispering, found him under Puerto Rico's starless night. The beach was a crescent of black sand and sharp rocks, carved by the sea's endless hunger, its edges fringed with tangled mangrove roots that twisted like the tunnel's veins, glinting faintly in the dark, as if the trench's glow lingered, watching. Elias lay sprawled, the plank abandoned, the waves lapping at his boots, their foam curling with patterns he couldn't ignore. Spirals tightening, alive, a mirror to the marks on his skin, the core's truth, the god's claim. His breath came in ragged gasps, his body trembling, the cold seeping into his bones, his heart racing. A pulse that wasn't his but the system's, the chant's fading whisper, the sea's relentless roar. He clutched the notebook tighter, its pages crumbling, the spirals glowing, as if the truth was writing itself through him, not to destroy but to use, to make him a signal, a data point, a witness to a cycle that didn't care, didn't judge, just worked, eternal, indifferent, alive. His eyes darted, spiraling, searching the waves, the sky, the shadows, expecting disks, green light, the structure's return, but there was only the sea, black and vast, hiding the trench, the god, the awakening. He laughed, a jagged, unhinged sound, swallowed by the waves' crash, a scientist seeing the universe's indifference and finding it absurd, profound, true. "The mother in the deep," he rasped, his voice raw, cracking, the words spilling from a mind fractured by visions, collapsing stars, glowing seas, his mother's spiraling eyes, the core's flood of truths, the old one's patience. The notebook slipped, his fingers numb, but he clawed it back, its sodden weight a tether to the chamber, the core, the god that had marked him, claimed him. His forearms glowed faintly, the spirals pulsing, a rhythm that wasn't his but the sea's, the system's, a connection to a network that spanned galaxies, voids, time itself, a cycle that didn't need his name, his proof, his life. He rolled onto his back, staring at the starless sky, its black expanse a void that wasn't empty but crowded, watched by things that didn't sleep, didn't die, just waited, their patience a predators, their purpose unknowable. Footsteps crunched on the sand, cautious, heavy, breaking through the sea's roar, the chant's whisper, his mind's chaos. Shadows loomed, 3 fishermen, their faces weathered, eyes wide with fear and suspicion, their lanterns casting weak yellow light that flickered against the beach's black sheen, the mangrove's twisted roots, Elias's trembling form. They wore faded shirts and salt-stained caps, their hands gripping nets and knives, tools of a life bound to the sea. Now weapons against a man who wasn't a man but a raving ghost, marked by spirals, spitting truths they didn't want. "Oi viejo, ¿qué pasó?" one asked, his voice low, wary, his lantern raised, its light catching Elias's spiraling pupils, the glowing marks on his forearms, the notebook's faint pulse. Elias laughed again, a choking sound, his eyes wild, spiraling, fixed on the sea, the waves curling, their foam tracing patterns, spirals tightening, alive, a sign, a summons, a god. "The mother in the deep," he muttered, his voice a prayer, a curse, a vow, the words tumbling over the waves' crash, the fisherman's murmurs, the chant's fading echo. "She's alive, in the trench, in the sea, in us. Seeds, scouts, spirals, everywhere. They're waking, don't you see? Not gods, not machines, systems eternal, indifferent, alive. His hands gestured, trembling, the notebook slipping, its pages splaying, the spirals glowing brighter, as if responding to his words, the sea's pulse, the god's presence. The fishermen stepped back, their lanterns shaking, their whispers sharp. Loco, Poseido. El Abismo lo toco. Their fear a mirror to the island's old stories, the abuela's warnings of Luz del Abismo. The light that claimed men marked them, broke them. Elias's eyes darted, spiraling, catching their faces, their fear, their lanterns flicker. But he saw through them, to the sea, the waves, the spirals, the truth that wasn't his but was now, undeniable, inescapable. The oldest fisherman, his face carved with wrinkles, his eyes dark with something older than fear, knelt beside Elias, his knife glinting, not raised but ready, his voice steady, heavy with the weight of stories told by firelight. Viejo, what did you see down there? The trench, the lights, habla claro. Elias's laugh broke into a sob, his hands clawing at the sand, the notebook, the spirals on his skin, their glow flaring. A pulse that wasn't his but the core's, the god's, a mark that wouldn't fade, couldn't fade. The mother, he whispered, his voice raw, his eyes spiraling, fixed on the sea, the waves curling, their foam tracing spirals, tightening alive. She's not a ship, not a creature, a system, a seed planted eons ago, growing scouts, discs, eyes that watch, wait, harvest. The old ones, they're waking not to rule but to reset, to spiral everything into their truth. A cycle that doesn't care, doesn't judge, just works, eternal, indifferent, alive. The fishermen exchanged glances, their lanterns flickering, their whispers sharp, their fear thickening, a wall between them and the raving man, marked by spirals, claimed by the deep. The youngest, barely 20, his hands trembling, crossed himself, muttering prayers to La Virgin, his eyes darting to the sea, the waves, the shadows, expecting lights, discs, the trench's glow. Elias saw it, their fear, their prayers, their lives, and laughed again, a sound that wasn't joy but fracture, echoing over the waves' crash, the chant's whisper, the god's presence. You can't pray it away, he rasped, his voice breaking, his eyes spiraling, his hands clutching the notebook, its spirals glowing, a relic, a vow, a truth he'd carry, no matter what it cost. They're in the sea, the sky, the stars, in us. The spirals, the marks, the truth. We're not even ants, just signals, data, specks in a system that's waking, eternal, indifferent, alive. The oldest fisherman stood, his knife still glinting, his eyes dark, not with fear now but with resolve. A man who'd seen the sea's secrets, heard the abuela's stories, knew the cost of the abyss. Vamos to Genlo, he said, his voice low, final, turning from Elias, the raving ghost, the marked man, the witness to a truth they didn't want, couldn't bear. The others followed, their lanterns fading, their footsteps crunching, their whispers swallowed by the waves' roar, the sea's pulse, the god's indifference. Elias lay alone, the notebook clutched to his chest, the tape's case burning, the spirals on his skin glowing faintly. A pulse that wasn't his but the core's, the system's, a connection to a network that didn't need his name, his proof, his life. His eyes fixed on the sea, the waves curling, their foam tracing spirals, tightening, alive, a sign, a summons, a god that had seen him, claimed him, marked him. Elias stared at the sea, its waves curling, their foam tracing spirals, a sign, a summons, a god, as Rosa arrived, her face pale with horror, her voice trembling, pleading with a man who was no longer her brother but a witness, marked, claimed, broken. Elias lay half-propped against a rock, his boots sinking into the sand, the notebook clutched to his chest. Rosa approached, her footsteps crunching on the sand, hesitant, her silhouette sharp against the sea's black expanse, her face pale, her dark hair tangled by the wind, her eyes wide with fear, grief, love. She wore a faded jacket and jeans, her hands clutching a flashlight, its beam weak, trembling, casting jagged shadows across the rocks, the mangroves, Elias's crumpled form. She'd heard the fishermen's whispers, their tales of a raving man, marked by the abyss, washed ashore like driftwood, speaking of mothers and spirals and truths no one wanted. She'd driven through the night, her heart heavy with memories of Elias, the astronomer, the dreamer, the man who'd chased stars and lost himself to the sea. Now seeing him, she stopped, her breath catching, her flashlight shaking, its light catching his spiraling pupils, the glowing marks on his forearms, the notebook's faint pulse. Elias, she whispered, her voice breaking, a plea, a prayer, a call to a man she didn't recognize, a ghost marked by the deep. He laughed, a jagged, unhinged sound, swallowed by the waves' crash, a scientist seeing the universe's indifference and finding it absurd, profound, true. "They're in us now," he rasped, his voice raw, cracking, his eyes spiraling, fixed on the sea, the waves curling, their foam tracing spirals, tightening, alive. "The mother, the system, the old ones, they're not out there, Rosa. They're in the sea, the sky, the stars, in us. Spirals, marks, truths. We're not even ants, just signals, data, specks in a cycle that's waking, eternal, indifferent, alive." His hands gestured, trembling, the notebook slipping, its pages splaying, the spirals glowing brighter, as if responding to his words, the sea's pulse, the god's presence. Rosa knelt beside him, her flashlight dropping, her hands reaching for his, but she froze, her fingers hovering over the spirals on his skin, their faint green glow a warning, a barrier, a truth she couldn't touch. "Elias, please," she said, her voice trembling, tears streaking her face, her eyes searching his, hoping for a spark of the brother she'd known, the man who'd taught her constellations, laughed over coffee, dreamed of stars. "What happened? What did you see? Come back to me." But his eyes, spiraling, didn't meet hers, fixed instead on the sea, the waves, the spirals, a reality that wasn't hers but was now, undeniable, inescapable. He laughed again, a choking sound, his hands clawing at the sand, the notebook, the spirals on his skin, their glow flaring, a pulse that wasn't his but the core's, the god's, a mark that wouldn't fade, couldn't fade. "Come back," he whispered, his voice raw, his eyes spiraling, his face twisting into a smile that wasn't his but the system's, the god's, a mockery of the man he'd been. "There's no coming back, Rosa. The mother showed me, seeds, scouts, spirals, a network older than time, waking to reset everything. Not with fire, but with silence, a cycle that doesn't care, doesn't judge, just works, eternal, indifferent, alive." Rosa's sob broke, a sound swallowed by the waves' roar, the sea's pulse, the god's indifference. She grabbed his shoulders, shaking him, her hands slipping on his soaked shirt, her voice rising, desperate, pleading. "You're not making sense, Elias. You're here, you're alive, come home, please. Whatever you saw, it's over. You're safe now." But his laugh surged, sharp, unhinged, echoing over the beach, the rocks, the mangroves, a sound that wasn't joy but fracture, a scientist broken by a truth that didn't need his proof, his name, his soul. "Safe?" he rasped, his eyes spiraling, his hands clutching the notebook, its spirals glowing, a relic, a vow, a truth he'd carry, no matter what it cost. "There's no safe, Rosa. They're in us, spirals, marks, truths. The mother's in the deep, in the sea, in me, in you. Look at the waves, Rosa. Look at them." She turned, her eyes following his, her breath catching, her flashlight forgotten, its beam flickering on the sand, the rocks, the sea. The waves curled, their foam glinting, not with moonlight but with a green flicker, a ghost of the core's light, the system's gaze, the old one's patience. And there, in the foam, she saw them, spirals tightening alive, curling in the wave's crest, their patterns fleeting, yet undeniable, a sign, a summons, a god. Her hands trembled, her heart racing, her mind rejecting what her eyes saw, what Elias knew, what the sea whispered. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking, her eyes darting back to Elias, his spiraling pupils, his glowing marks, a truth she didn't want, couldn't bear. But he laughed, a sound that wasn't his but the system's, the god's, a vow to a reality that wasn't hers but was now, undeniable, inescapable. "They're in us now," he repeated, his voice raw, his eyes spiraling, his hands gesturing to the sea, the sky, the stars hidden by the night's black veil, a void that wasn't empty but crowded, watched by things that didn't sleep, didn't die, just waited, their patience a predators, their purpose unknowable. The mother, the system, the old ones, they don't need our prayers, our fears, our lives. They're waking Rosa to reset everything, to spiral existence into their truth, a cycle that doesn't care, doesn't judge, just works, eternal, indifferent, alive. He clutched the notebook tighter, its pages crumbling. Rosa's hands fell, her sobs silent, her eyes wide, searching his face, his spirals, his truth, finding nothing of the man she'd known, only a ghost, a witness, a speck. The waves roared, their foam tracing spirals, tightening, alive, a rhythm that wasn't the sea's but the system's, the core's, the god's, a pulse that shook the beach, the rocks, the mangroves, Elias's bones, Rosa's heart. He stared at the sea, his eyes spiraling, his pupils curling, a mirror to the waves, the foam, the truth, a reality that wasn't human but cosmic, a cycle that didn't care, didn't judge, just worked, eternal, indifferent, alive. "Look at the waves, Rosa," he whispered, his voice raw, his smile breaking, a prayer, a surrender, a vow to a god he'd met, no matter what it was, ship, machine, or something worse. "They're in us now, in the sea, in the sky, in everything. Spirals marks truths. We're not even ants, just signals, data, specks in a system that's waking, eternal, indifferent, alive. Rosa staggered back, her hands trembling, her eyes darting from Elias to the sea, the waves, the spirals, her mind reeling, rejecting, yet seeing, knowing, fearing. She saw the notebook, its glowing spirals, the marks on his skin, the truth in his eyes, a reality that wasn't hers but was now, undeniable, inescapable. Her sob broke again, a sound swallowed by the waves' roar, the sea's pulse, the god's indifference. She reached for him, one last time, her fingers brushing his hand, the spirals on his skin, their glow warm, alive, a barrier she couldn't cross, a truth she couldn't share. Elias, she whispered, her voice breaking, a plea, a prayer, a goodbye, but his eyes, spiraling, didn't meet hers, fixed on the sea, the waves, the spirals, a god that had seen him, claimed him, marked him. The beach stretched desolate, the waves roared, the mangroves twisted, the rocks glistened, the sea watched, waited, spiraled. Elias lay there, the notebook clutched to his chest, the tape's case burning, the spirals on his skin glowing faintly. A pulse that wasn't his but the cores, the systems, a connection to a network that didn't need his name, his proof, his life. Rosa stood, her flashlight forgotten, her hands trembling, her eyes wet, her heart heavy with grief, fear, love, a witness to a truth that wasn't human but cosmic, a cycle that didn't care, didn't judge, just worked, eternal, indifferent, alive. The waves curled, their foam tracing spirals, tightening, alive, a sign, a summons, a god, and Elias laughed, a jagged, unhinged sound, swallowed by the sea's roar. A scientist broken by a truth that didn't need his proof, his name, his soul. He whispered, "They're in us now," his voice lost in the waves' crash, a prayer, a surrender, a truth that broke him, claimed him, made him its own. The chant lingered, a pulse in his bones, a vibration that shook his teeth, his spine, his soul, a voice that wasn't human but alive, whispering his name, a summons to a truth he'd die to uncover, a god that was waking, eternal, indifferent, alive. The waves rolled, the sand clung, and Elias stared at the sea, his eyes spiraling, his pupils curling, a mirror to the waves, the foam, the truth, a reality that wasn't human but cosmic, a cycle that didn't care, didn't judge, just worked, eternal, indifferent, alive. Rosa turned, her footsteps crunching, her sobs silent, her heart breaking.